Make a wish for once with a secret. And if I manifest best, guess I'll keep it. I'm sick, go with the flow, new flow, up phones one day. Thought ones, thoughts come, what's run, yes, I need it.
Welcome to Pop Culture Cuties, the podcast that blends local businesses with the broader pop culture. Each week, I sit down with North Georgia's movers and shakers, business owners, creatives, and industry insiders to talk about their work, their journey, and how their field connects to the broader cultural landscape. So if you love great conversations over tea and wine, then this is the place for you. So before we get started, I want to inform and remind viewers about our upcoming Volunteers for Literacy duck race and Duck-a-Duck competition. You've seen it on Facebook, in businesses, in Clarksville, and Cornelia libraries, and at the annual Mountain Laurel Festival in Clarksville for the past 5 years. Large yellow ducks dressed as characters such as Rapunzel, Little Miss Muffet, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Huckleberry Finn, and yes, even Dolly Parton, have been the object of exclamation and adoration everywhere they are seen. So this, the 6th annual Volunteers for Literacy Duck-a-Duck contest, will be held in May, and all duck race sponsors and supporters are eligible to enter. Sponsorships are available beginning at $100. Ducks can be decorated as characters from children's books, movies, fairy tales, as well as adult books or movies, or they may be decorated to market a business. Sponsorships are not limited to businesses. Individuals are also invited to enter. This year, the Duck-a-Duck contest will be held several days prior to the Mountain Laurel Festival. Winning ducks will ride in the Mountain Laurel Festival parade. After the parade, all Duck-a-Ducks will be displayed at the VFL tent on East Water Street, where duck race tickets will also be sold. So first through third place ribbons will be awarded for Most Creative Duck, Best Novice Duck-a-Duck, Best Business-Themed Duck-a-Duck, Most Artistic Duck-a-Duck, and People's Choice. So if interested in participating and helping to keep Volunteers for Literacy moving throughout the community, reach out to me at the Cute North Georgian magazine via our email or DM. Now today we have with us Mr. Michael Mendenhall of the Sheriff's Criminal Investigation Division. Hello, Michael. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. It's good to be here.
We're very happy to have you. We'll go ahead and just get started with a few questions. So our first question is, what type of cases do you most often investigate in your role as lead investigator for Habersham County?
So lead investigator is actually a term for someone who takes the lead on the case. I'm a persons investigator. I'm assigned to our persons division. That means we investigate anything that has a person as an actual victim rather than property. I work a little bit with domestic violence, sexual assaults, homicides, things like that. But I'm primarily focused on crimes against children. So child abuse, child sexual abuse, child neglect, and those sort of things.
Okay, is that a real problem in this community?
Surprisingly, it's a lot more common than you would think. I wasn't aware of that until I came up here just a few years ago, but it seems to be a generational problem here at Habersham.
Right. Are there any particular, I guess that lends to my next question. When you mentioned generational patterns, are there any particular trends or patterns in crime that you're seeing more of in recent years?
Well, like I said, the generational thing, that's pretty much a problem anywhere. When you've got families that have settled down in an area for a long time, everybody knows each other, they kind of know each other's business, but they also have their skeletons in their closet, I guess you could say. But as far as trends and things like that, the biggest thing that we've seen up and coming would be cyber crimes, solicitation of children through the internet, through social media, online gaming. And we've seen grooming through these platforms, as well as a solicitation for sex trafficking and things like that.
And can you walk us through kind of what it takes to become a lead investigator?
So to become an investigator takes pretty much just time and experience. We go through a lot of specialized training, usually dedicated toward which direction we're trying to go. We typically have persons, property, and drugs are our 3 main categories of investigator, and each one has their own specialized training. So I'm strictly a persons investigator, so I've gone through things like crimes against children, domestic violence investigations, sexual assault investigations, things like that. So anything that just pertaining to mine. I've got close to 2,000 hours of training, with at least 2/3 of it dedicated to what I do now.
Right, and so when I speak, I'm going to speak with the layman's terms that most people would associate with like law and order, okay? I don't know what I'm talking about, so feel free to correct me at any point with my terminology. Do you start as, like, do all police officers, all investigators, do they like start as like a beat cop?
Well, it kind of depends on where you start. If you start off with a sheriff's office, typically you're going to start in the jail. You'll do a year and a half, 2 years, sometimes even more in the jail, learning your basic duties as law enforcement there before going to mandate, completing the police academy, and then potentially going to either patrol the courthouse, things like that. And then usually you spend some time on patrol before coming to investigation, so you have time to learn how to deal with people, how to talk to people, how to read people, how to work a regular beat, as you'd say. Now, if you start with the police department, it's a little different. They don't have a jail, so you go straight to their patrol. You pick up a beat and you just start answering calls after your field training. You hop in a car and you go with it.
Gotcha. Okay. And so then there's the aspect of, so there's being a police officer, and then I guess you choose the type of police officer you want to be, or investigator, and then there's several paths from there that you can choose.
That's right. You can pick from any direction you want to go in law enforcement, especially if I advocate a lot for working for sheriff's offices, because there are so many avenues that you can take to progress your career. But it's all about where you see yourself at the end of your career. Where do you want to go? And then you just start requesting training and go into specialized classes to get you there.
Right. Okay, so you do your specialized training, and then you have to take classes. Where do you take your classes? Is it like through a university? Is it through programs?
So there are classes that are through the Georgia Public Safety and Training. We can go there and take a lot of classes. That's actually where our mandate or police academy is through. But there's also things like FLETC, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, where you can pick up some advanced training that the FBI goes through. There's outside classes that you can pick up from outside organizations that will kind of blend into what we do as far as interviews, interrogations, interviews, things like that. Those are just a couple examples of classes I've been to, but they're offered by outside organizations that your agency can send you to.
Okay, and as an investigator, I imagine that there's probably a lot of different people that you work with in the county. Who are some partners that you guys have?
Well, me personally, I work very closely with DFACS. I work with the Circle of Hope, which is a domestic violence advocacy center. I work really closely with the DA's office and the court's offices and things like that. And the Faith organization, which is a child advocacy organization, we actually work really close with them. They handle a lot of our what we call forensic interviews, which are interviews with children.
Right. It's really interesting. I know for years I was a domestic violence advocate, so I worked in the shelters day to day with the ladies that lived there, and it was my job to coordinate the pickups all across the state and the transfers of individuals to the shelter. And I can remember the real compassion that so many of these police officers had with the moms, with the kids. Some would carry like teddy bears in the car. Maybe later on they might bring supplies if they, like, I remember in one instance a little boy had a trash bag for his clothing and all of his possessions, and a police officer donated a suitcase to the little boy, anonymous, so that, he never really got the credit for it. And it wasn't about the credit. So I've seen a lot of compassion, not only in the drop-off moments, but too in the county-to-county transfers. And what I mean by that, for those that aren't familiar with this terminology, is, say for instance, there's a woman in jeopardy in Albany, and she doesn't have transportation to make it to the shelter in Dahlonega. Well, instead of just saying, tough luck, oftentimes you can coordinate with the sheriff's department, and there will be deputies or someone on duty that will pick up the woman, drive her through the county to the next county, to the next county, to the next county, until they have reached the safe location. So it really taught me the more human and compassionate side of law enforcement, for sure. Right. And just the ways that they work in such an integral way with the community abroad. Now, what does kind of a typical day look like for you? Or is there even such thing as a typical day in your line of work?
Well, we do have, I guess, what you'd call a typical day, though it's probably a lot different from someone else's typical day, and that's days that we do nothing but paperwork. Every action that we take, every decision we make, every interview that we have, it all has to be documented. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen. is how we look at it.
Yeah.
So a typical day would be me sitting right here working for 8 or 9 hours, typing reports, re-watching interviews over and over again, looking for minor details, just to build that case and document what I have, so whenever I do make a decision, I know that I've done the best I can to gather all the information. There are also days where we just do interviews all day long, witnesses, victims, offenders, whatever it may be. A little different than the average person's typical day, but that's pretty typical for us.
It sounds kind of cyclical though, like there's a rhyme and reason, kind of a rhythm to it at least. Gosh, I could never do that work. Mostly because I could not do the paperwork. And there would be, the streets would be like Gotham City if I was on your police force, because I wouldn't document anything. All of the evidence would get contaminated. It would be a real problem. So I'm glad that there are people out there that can focus and do the detailed work that would be impossible for me. So when I was growing up, we were all warned. We were all warned about the white vans.
Oh yeah.
And the strangers in the online chat rooms pretending to be kids. But today that's not necessary. We're not as worried about the white vans in the chat rooms because that's not necessarily where the teens are at. What does child luring or online grooming look like today?
Well, a lot of your grooming and your child predators that are working online, they're going to use things like online gaming, things like Call of Duty, Fortnite. Roblox is probably the biggest one I've seen. I always say Roblox is the devil because there are so many different chat rooms that you can get on, and you never know who's on the other side of those conversations. So that's a big way that it's evolving, and these child predators are getting to the children through these online chats, through gaming. There's also social media is another big thing. TikTok, where a lot of it is just deleted after so many seconds or minutes after it's recorded, through texting apps, messaging apps like WhatsApp, things like that. And now a big one that's coming up is an app called Janky.
Interesting, I've never heard of that one.
Right, and it's still up and coming. A lot of teenagers know about it because it encrypts your messages, which is supposed to mean privacy, but really those messages can be saved, screenshotted.
Even Signal can, yeah. And I have Signal, but it's, you can tell when someone screenshots it, but they can still have the screenshot as a Snapchat.
Right, and Janky generates a fake phone number for you.
Wow.
So you could use my phone number, and anybody who runs that phone number is going to show up as mine.
Gosh.
So it's really tricky for us sometimes. It's what we call a spoof number. It's a randomly generated phone number that they're using for communication, and when we track it, it leads to someone completely different.
I had no idea. And I actually thought that coming into this interview that nothing you would say would necessarily surprise me on that front. I've been taught for 2 years, so I'm a little out of the loop, back when I was teaching Snapchat was still the thing. So it sounds like the world has moved on. And how have the threats kind of evolved, and what should modern parents and kids be on the lookout for?
Well, again, the social media and the gaming are the two biggest that I've seen. There are things out there like Discord,
right.
Another one. It's advertised, and for the most part, it's used for something completely innocent, but can be warped and manipulated and changed to interact with our children in ways that we didn't know was possible.
Right, and I think about, even, again, going back to my kind of education background, so often teachers really recognize the influence of games on kids. I would argue that gaming is more influential on kids than TV and movies. That culture is not, that was our culture. TV and movies, and to a degree they're watching TV, and a little bit they're watching movies, but they really don't have the attention span for movies anymore, and they're rapidly losing the attention span for television shows. And gaming is very social. When you're playing Call of Duty, you're with the lads organizing. I was gonna try and make a military reference, but I don't know any, right? But you're organizing some kind of charge together as a gang doing that. And the gaming world is, if you want to connect with kids, be it like as a teacher to try and be a good influence on them, or to not try to make metaphors for them, then you want to do it through gaming. But if also, I can see where on the flip side, if you want to have access to kids and connect with kids, that can be nefarious.
One thing a lot of people don't know about the gaming apps and all of these social media and text messaging apps and all that stuff, they all have a GPS locator built into the app, and if you don't know how to turn that off, you're constantly broadcasting your location. And anytime you access the internet or anything like that, you have an IP address that's just leaving a footprint everywhere you go. And that in part makes it really easy for us when we need to locate something, but it also makes it easy for anybody else who knows how to do that. So we've got some of these guys that are able to get a location on a victim and find them. They'll show up at their house. They'll start following them on social media, sending them messages. It can evolve from just a simple conversation on a game all the way up to now you've got somebody sitting outside your house in a car you don't recognize waiting for your child to come out alone or for you to come out alone.
I believe it. I really do. Now, what are some practical steps that parents, guardians can take to protect their children from harm? Are there signs, behaviors, or online habits that you would encourage them to pay closer attention to?
Absolutely. Monitoring your kids and communicating with your kids. That's the two most important things. There are several ways out there where we can monitor our kids. Apps like Bark, the Google, I forget the name of it, but it's a Google app that syncs all of your devices together so you can see incoming messages and things like that. And then there's also Life 360 that just lets you know where your kid is at. All of those are a great way to keep an eye on what your kid's doing. You can also be discreet with it. They may not know that you're able to see certain things, and you can allow them some privacy as a teenager or as a young adult, but also pay attention to who they're talking to, what they're talking about, and things that may be going in or out that are unhealthy, pictures, videos, things like that. And I've found that with my kids, reading some of these messages and things, I've learned a lot of their lingo, so that helps as well, so you know what they're talking about when they're talking to their friends and things like that, which is very important. And as far as talking to your kids, just get to know them, have conversations with them, be that person that they can trust and that they can come to if they do have a problem. A lot of the times that we get cases like I work, we don't get a disclosure until years later. It's because they didn't trust the people, the adults in their life to tell them, or they were embarrassed, they were ashamed to tell them. So make your kids comfortable, make them know that they can tell you anything and mean it. You can't just say it and not mean it, but actually mean it. Sit down with your kids and talk to them. Watch for behaviors like withdrawing, avoiding social groups and social activities that they would typically go to, any erratic changes in behaviors, lashing out, acting out, refusing to go to school. I'm not saying that those are all signs of abuse or that something's going on, but they are common with the kind of trauma that comes with these cases. So keep an eye out for those things and talk to them when you see a problem. Ask them if everything's okay, and they may not tell you everything, but they may tell you enough to know how to handle it.
Right, and I often would hear, I'm sure you and I have both heard this as just people that work with parents, with kids. There are parents that say, like, I can't monitor my kid. And that always grinds my gears, right? Because you can always control and monitor your kid if you're motivated enough to do it. Like, say your kid's sneaking out, put a Ring doorbell. Right. On your windows, or find a security system to put on your windows. Not doing their homework, no fun till done. Kind of an arrangement, right? There's always a way to, take away the smartphone or find ways to block aspects of the phone,
right? While
also kind of recognizing that there are things that your kids are capable of that you might not think that they're capable of. And as a teacher, I often found, or I would occasionally find when speaking with the parents, that, well, my kid would never do that. And when I would reach out and say, hey, the student told me that they have a Finstagram, which was the thing in 2022 or something like that, or 2020. And, if a kid tells me they have a fake social media network, as a private school teacher with a good relationship with parents, I'll tell them, I'm shooting this information over to your parents, and then their parents would find out, but sometimes the parents think, my kid wouldn't do that. And so I guess it's a little bit of not being naive about your own kids, while also recognizing your own strength as a parent to control your child.
I think a lot of parents these days, especially from our generation, they want to try to be their kid's friend. And while that is important to have that relationship with your children, they also have to know that there are boundaries and that there's a reason that there are boundaries. You can't hide those reasons from your kids. The because I said so argument it's invalid these days. Right. Kids want to know why you're telling them something, so tell them. If it's a scary reason, scare them. My teenagers, they know this is why I'm telling you not to do that. If I tell you don't go walking the street after dark, well, there's a reason that I'm telling you.
Well, it's better to be scared on the front end than the back end.
Absolutely. And it's better to offend your kid, I guess you would say, or make them a little aggravated with you now than it is for you to be looking for your kid. The amount of missing children that are never found it's astonishing, to be honest with you, and it's terrifying as a parent.
It would truly shock people if they've never looked into it to find out the statistics on those numbers.
Right. Thousands a day go missing, and a very small percentage of those are located, and even smaller percentage of that are located unharmed.
Okay. And I've heard it was a true crime podcast called Crime Junkies, but they, and I've also read this, and I think it was John Douglas, who wrote Mindhunters, who said that if a child is not found within 3 hours, that you can essentially assume that they have been killed. Is there truth to that?
I'm sure there's somewhere in the world where that's true.
Yeah.
Most cases, not to my experience. And I've worked with a lot of missing kids where usually that first few hours is really essential for gaining information. You know, a lot of them are just, from my experience in this area, are just runaways, or, you know, they've just wandered out of the house. And if they're younger children, they're usually somewhere.
And I think it was to the exclusion of children who had run away. I think it was in instances of abduction, and I should have been more specific with that. Yes, and so you often see it, and that's something that I know last summer, that was a big conversation, the so-called all these missing kids, but in reality it was summer, and kids get itchy feet, and they ran away.
Right. And
so sometimes there can be this hysteria around the topic of missing children, which is sometimes valid, but also oftentimes the kids are found and they've just absconded, which is, of course, it's a terrible situation. It's very dangerous.
Well, it kind of goes back to the conversation we were having about the online grooming of these kids. A lot of these, especially teenage girls, have met someone online and they're either running to meet this person or they're with this person already. And that kind of brings us back full circle to why it's so important to monitor what your children are doing and who they're talking to.
Absolutely. And because I know sometimes runaways can also be dismissed too by the population. So. And that actually leads me to my next question, which is how can the community as a whole help law enforcement keep children safe? Are there ways neighbors, schools, or churches can get more involved?
Absolutely there is. I think one of the things we have to remember is it takes a village. As a community, these kids aren't just the parents' kids. These are our kids. We've given them, with this right here, we've given them access to some of the most dangerous situations that they could be exposed to. And it's our responsibility as adults to keep these children safe. So acting as a team, acting as a fellow person of the community, pay attention to these kids. If you see something, say something. Never be afraid that you're going to offend someone or question their parenting style or anything like that. It's better to offend someone and make sure that a child is safe than to just brush it off and potentially have this child injured or damaged for the rest of their life. And a lot of times I see, they're just a bad kid, or they're just making things up for attention. That's a really big one. It's important that as a community we believe these kids. You hear a lot of people say kids lie. Well, kids do lie. We all know it. So if you have kids, they've lied to you. But studies have shown that in this field, when a child has been victimized, the number is about 3% of children who have made it up. 97% of children are making a genuine disclosure of some form of abuse. And it's important that we, as a community, take them at their word, believe them as a community, and leave it up to us as law enforcement or as professionals to find the evidence and determine what actually happened. We don't always get the exact truth, but at least they have that community back, and then they have those adults that they can trust and go to and say anything, and that adult is going to take them seriously and get them some help if they can.
Absolutely, and that makes me think of something we touched on just a little bit earlier, and that is the aspect of generational misbehavior, right? Yes. And crime. And so often people know, right? They're like, that's just Larry,
Yes.
That's just Larry, that's just how he is, that's how his daddy was, that's how his granddaddy was, but he's okay. And people know, and then they don't report. And I imagine in rural spaces that could potentially be probably an issue where people have been set generationally and put down roots, but put down toxic roots.
Well, I call that the dirty old man effect. Oh, he's just a dirty old man.
That is a perfect way to articulate it.
And it really is a terrible thing. I'd like to think that the way that this career field has evolved, the way that our job has evolved, we're becoming the death of a generation in a good way.
Yeah.
Because all of these older offenders who are just the dirty old men, whose fathers were just the dirty old men, we're stopping these guys. Now, unfortunately, they've had years and years and years of victims. Some of them are even what you would consider like a serial child molester.
Yeah.
Or a serial abuser, or whatever crime that they're committing. They've passed this down to the next generation, to the next generation, and the next generation after that, through their children, their nieces and nephews, their grandkids, their great-grandkids, and things like that. And it's really important that we start recognizing that the dirty old man may not just be a dirty old man. It could potentially be a predator. And if you have someone like that in your family, keep an eye on them. Don't be afraid to, if it makes you uncomfortable, if it feels wrong to you, don't be afraid to step in and say, I don't feel comfortable with that. Stop.
Absolutely, and it makes me think of, again, I told you, I'm a super layman when it comes to this. I don't know a lot. So I'm going to evoke a crime junkie's quote. Be weird, be rude, stay alive. Don't worry about being weird. Don't worry about offending people. You don't have to countenance their odd behavior. You can confront it and you can avoid it and just actively just remove yourself from the situation. It's okay if you're weird. It's okay if you're rude, because at the end of the day, you're alive and your kids are alive.
Right. And that is what is most important. A lot of people think I would know a child predator if I saw one. That's the same way as saying I would know a serial killer if I saw one. They don't have a look. They don't have certain interests. They don't all display the same traits or the same odd characteristics. Some of them, of course, are going to fall into that when you've got so many of these offenders out there, but paying attention to behavior is where you'll find is more consistent, because they all have typical behaviors that they fall under. Be it they like to kind of weasel their way in and make people feel comfortable with the way that they are. Giving the little girls hugs that are maybe longer than normal, pulling them on their lap, not caring if they're trying to pull away. Right. And then we've got other family members reinforcing this behavior by saying, hey, that's your uncle, that's your grandma. Yeah. In some cases, that's your aunt or grandma. Because these types of crimes, they're not gender specific either. But when you reinforce that type of ideology or that type of behavior, you're just opening up for a child to be hurt or another adult to be hurt even.
Right, and I've heard it said that you should never say so-and-so would never do that. Right. And I can believe that. There are very few people, very, very few, that if someone said that they were arrested and charged and found guilty of a crime, that I would say they would never do that.
We've seen that a lot lately. You could go to the sheriff's office Facebook page and look at any of the offenders that are arrested for something like that, and you're going to see people coming to their defense. They would never do that. I've known this person for however many years, and I don't think they would ever do that. Well, you clearly didn't know them as well as you thought you did, which is their goal.
Yeah, be it Associate Pastor Ted, and this is not a specific associate, this is a made-up Associate Pastor Ted, right. Or Coach Linda, or Neighbor Fred, right? Fred might mow old people's lawns in the neighborhood and pass out the good candy at Halloween and still be a perpetrator.
Absolutely. And that's their goal. They want to blend in. They want to be viewed as normal. To them, they aren't normal. Their behavior isn't wrong. It's not bad. Right. Maybe against the law, and they know it's against the law, but they're not thinking of that. They are seeking one type of pleasure, and that's it.
Absolutely. Would you offer to adult?
Pay attention. Situational awareness is key. You should always know what's going on around you. I know it looks like paranoia when you've got somebody looking over their shoulder, you've got someone sitting facing the door, you've got somebody who's crossing the street when someone they feel uncomfortable with is coming towards them, and that's frowned upon, but it shouldn't be. If you're uncomfortable, make yourself comfortable.
That's a great way to put it.
If you feel like you need help, ask someone for help. Put yourself in a crowded area. Blend in with a group. Avoid that side of the road. Avoid that dark alley or whatever it may be, as obvious or as discreet as it looks. If your body is telling you it's wrong, then it's wrong.
Absolutely.
Trust your instincts.
And I think I was in Athens not too long ago, and a man was literally shooting up heroin, on the sidewalk. And I didn't want to be rude, even though this guy's being very rude, shooting up heroin on the sidewalk. That's pretty impolite. And I just walked right past him. And, I think now I'm like, that was probably pretty stupid. Why am I worried about being weird, being rude, when this person is being weird and being rude? So it was just a failure. It was worrying about what this person might think rather than listening to the self-preservation instinct and that gift of fear.
Another thing as well is have some protection. If you don't agree with a firearm, you don't have to have a firearm. Get yourself some pepper spray. Get yourself a pocket knife. Whatever you need to defend yourself. Make sure that you're safe. It's really important just to, if you can't avoid that situation or you find yourself in that situation, to be able to get out of it. You can't just rely on the generosity or compassion or mercy of the person that's attacking you or trying to do whatever, steal your valuables, rob you, hurt you in any way. You can't rely on their mercy to get you out of that situation. So always have a way to protect yourself. And as far as people living alone, cameras. I'm a huge advocate for cameras. The Ring doorbell cameras, the internal and outdoor cameras. They're a great tool. And if you find yourself as a victim of these crimes, property crimes or whatever, those cameras, they're gonna help us to solve that crime as quickly as possible. And not only that, but when you're recording things like the road outside your house or the end of your driveway or what have it, and a crime happens somewhere in your neighborhood, neighborhood, that's also a good resource for us to help someone else who's been the victim of a crime.
Well, Mike, I've been the victim of a crime.
Oh, yeah?
A neighbor child came into my yard, and I got this on my Ring doorbell, and they picked off all the flowers of my newly planted phlox.
Oh, that's rude.
That's right, and I got it on camera, too. So, that's a lesson to everybody if you're a victim of a crime like I was.
Right.
Where your phlox are deflowered. It was very traumatic for me. This happened today, by the way. I know. So I'm going to make a report later. At the end of when this is over, I'm going to make a report and turn in this 7-year-old, or however old he is, this delinquent. Now, what are some major misconceptions that people have about investigative work or law enforcement in general that you wish you could correct?
One big one that comes to mind is the CSI effect. You've got these TV shows that are like, they got the cameras that zoom in and enhance. They can pull a fingerprint off of anything, and that's just not the case a lot of times. Our cameras definitely don't zoom in and enhance. Half the time, people don't have cameras, which is why I'm such a big advocate for it. A lot of times, they don't have cameras for us to view anyway. Mm-hmm. And if they do, they always go with the cheapest option, the Timu cameras, or the,
right.
Back in the day, the Wish cameras.
Yeah.
And, they're like 400 DPI, and we know that there's somebody standing there, but we can't tell the difference. And fingerprints are another big one. Somebody loses something or it gets stolen, they want fingerprints. One of the things to remember is that a fingerprint can only come off of something with a flat surface.
Right.
Any kind of porous surface, any kind of drywall, wood, plastic, anything that's porous or in an odd shape or in an odd place, most likely we're not going to get fingerprints off of that. We're looking for things like glass, metal, shiny plastics, things like that.
It's really specific, yeah.
Right.
And I bet a lot of people wear gloves now.
Oh, yeah.
Our criminals are stupid, though. That's something I have found is they're really dumb, thankfully.
Well, the ones that get caught are dumb.
That's a good point, okay.
Yeah, but everyone has seen those shows and they know about fingerprints. So yeah, a lot of people do wear gloves when they break into places or steal things or,
Yeah, like the CSI always makes the criminal look like a super genius
right.
or something like that. And I'm like, that's something somewhere in between, perhaps.
It also makes the investigators look like a super genius, and I can tell you that we're average people. We've just got a little bit more training than most, but, we're doing a job. We're just an average person that goes home at the end of the day. We're just sometimes able to put two and two together. So, that kind of thought process, the CSI effect, put some really unrealistic expectations on us, and understandably, if you don't know what we do, then obviously that's the thing you're going to go to, what you've seen on TV.
Or on Crime Junkies, in my case. Let's see. So, finally, what do you wish every resident of Habersham County knew about the work you and your team do behind the scenes?
We are here for you guys. That is our job. We are in this career because we're passionate about it. We care about the outcome. We all have our personal reasons for doing it. And if you're part of one of our investigations, you may not see that, but we are constantly working. There are times when we're putting in 18-hour days, multiple days without sleep. We skip meals, we skip family time, we skip family events and things like that. But we all have our reason for doing that, and that's to get justice for our victims.
That's right.
And, I want the community to know that no matter how small the crime may seem or whatever they're feeling, if it means something to you and it's a crime, report it to us. We're going to do our best to investigate it. You may not hear from us during the investigation, but be patient. These things take time, especially some of the more heinous things that we deal with. One of my cases could take anywhere from, if it's a really solid case, I may have it wrapped up in a month. If it's more of a tough whodunit type of case, I've worked cases for a year. Mm-hmm. And still working on getting an outcome for that. Just be patient with us. We're doing everything we can. We're going to continue to do everything we can. And, being patient, being compliant, being honest with us is the best way to speed up that process.
All right. So now, lightening the tone a little bit, we're going to transition to our rapid fire questions. And our first one, you answer these in 3 to 5 words. Coffee or energy drinks on a long day?
Energy drinks.
You actually answered in 1 word. Usually it's like 3 or 4 paragraphs, so good job. That was really condescending. I'm not going to do that clap anymore. What's one tool or gadget you can't do your job without?
The internet.
That's a good point, actually. Would you rather interview a suspect or analyze a crime scene?
Suspect all day.
Okay, and what's your favorite TV show or movie about detectives? Even detectives or... What's your favorite TV show or movie about detectives?
It's really cliche, but I like Law & Order SVU.
Yeah, it's a good one. I used to love that as a kid. All right. Now, why... I'm going to go back to one of these rapid fire questions. So why would you rather interview a suspect or analyze a crime scene?
I kind of like the hunt, the chase.
Gotcha,
and,
yeah.
You know, you think of a hound after a fox and a fox hunt, and they'll run them into a hole and corner them, and that's how it feels to catch one of these child predators that victimize on kids. And it's all like a game of chess. You've got to be several moves ahead and put yourself in their mind and think about exactly what they're thinking about, and it's fun.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I'm sure it's very rewarding. And of course, the show is called Pop Culture Cuties. Are you ready to be Are you a pop culture cutie, Mike?
I guess
Michael.
I am.
Let's see. So we decided, I always ask people, what do you know about for pop culture? And apparently Mr. Mendenhall here is a Harry Potter aficionado, just finished the Harry Potter series via Audible, right?
Yes, for about the fourth or fifth time.
That's
in my
right.
life. A little bit of a nerd.
Oh, no, I love it. I will say I've read other books because sometimes there are these Harry Potter fans, that's all they've read. I've read many other adult books, but I still love Harry Potter. It's a genuinely good book. I don't care what age.
Oh, yeah.
Great themes. Very funny. Even for adults.
In a lot of places, yeah.
So, I'm going to start with the first one. Which book in the Harry Potter series do you think has the most emotional punch and why?
Order of the Phoenix, or Sirius Black.
Love that one. That one was probably when I was a kid, I hated it because Harry Potter was so angsty. Mm-hmm. Because J.K. Rowling was making a real depiction of a teenager, but I was not. You know, I couldn't relate. And I'm like, why is he so angry all the time? But my dad explained to me, he's like, because he's a teenager. You know, as I read it as an adult, I'm like, yes, this is a 15-year-old boy.
Going through a lot of trauma as well.
And honestly, like, I will say, like, the depiction of fascism that J.K. Rowling makes is so convincing and so accurate. I mean, you can tell that she was born in the years after World War II because she truly understands intimately what fascism is on a media level, on a governmental level, and what it is like to resist fascism, too. So it's a book every person should read. And I normally might say this about Crime and Punishment, or I might also say this about To Kill a Mockingbird, but I would also put Harry Potter in there, I really would. Now, were you ever tempted to try a Birdie Bot's every flavor beans after reading about them? What flavor do you fear the most?
Actually, I did try them. So I grew up in Lincoln County, and there was a candy shop on the square that sold the every flavor beans. There's also another one in
I've seen those, yeah.
Dawsonville that sold them. I've got some nasty flavors. I think I've gotten the rotten fish one. I don't know who hurt the person that came up with a rotten fish jelly bean, but they probably should have reported it.
That's something for you to investigate, I guess. Who's your favorite book-only character? Or subplot that didn't quite make the leap to the movies?
I like the Creevy brothers.
Yes! They did kind of forget about the Creevy brothers.
And it was very emotional during the battle for Hogwarts. To the description of Neville Longbottom carrying the Creevy brothers in was...
Yes! Guys, that's a spoiler, but if you haven't read it yet, then that's your own fault. You should have read it by now.
20-something years old already.
I almost said this great American classic, but nonetheless, you should have already read it. That is really a very good scene. For me, it's SPEW.
Yes.
Hermione. People just don't understand how unhinged Hermione is.
Really, yeah.
I mean, she's scary. She's actually, like, she's good but borderline evil in the best ways. Like, permanently scarring another student because she snitched.
Or catching a lady that turns into a beetle in an unbreakable jar.
Yeah, like she could have died if she tried to transition, you know? Like, that's some dark triad stuff that hopefully she can work through in therapy. I doubt it, though, since she joined the government later in a very high position. So I don't know if that's conducive to reducing some of those bad impulses. Do you remember which house you thought you'd be in before taking the quiz, and were you right?
I always thought I was going to be in Gryffindor, and I was not right. Once the quiz came out, I was a Ravenclaw.
Yeah, and the Pottermore quiz is the definitive quiz.
Right.
So I'm a Gryffindor. I have my Gryffindor scarf, my Gryffindor hat. Let's see. I'm letting people know a lot about myself in this moment. I regret saying that out loud. I really wish I'd kept that one to myself. Okay. So did any of the deaths in the book hit you especially hard? How did you react?
Well, again, Sirius Black was a really hard one.
It was devastating.
I can understand on a personal level not having a father figure, finding a father figure, and then losing that father figure. And as a teenager that went through something similar, that's very traumatic. So
No.
it would have to be that one for sure.
Now, which book had the best magical setting? So there's the Tri-Wizard Tournament, the Department of Mysteries, and the Room of Requirement, things like that. Which one do you think had the best setting? There's the Potions Lair,
Right. I think it would be somewhere between the Tri-Wizard Tournament and the Room of Requirement during the Army of Dumbledore. Dumbledore's Army
yeah.
piece. There's a lot of magic going on there, especially in the books. A lot of different spells other than just the ones they used in the movie. And I thought that was really neat.
It is, and it's actually integrated into a lot of real ancient history. A lot of people don't realize that J.K. Rowling is in fact, I learned this from my own history of religions professor, just how much of the magical world she made and so many inside jokes related to history and Latin and language. So for me, I'd say it's Dumbledore's office, potentially, with the pensieve and all of that.
Book office for sure.
Yes,
for sure.
The book office. And what would your Patronus be? And do you think it would have, what would your Patronus be?
I would love to say it would be something like a bear or something like that, but it would probably honestly be a honey badger.
I think I could see that. Honey badger. I think mine was a fox when I took the test. So I was pretty happy with that. I'm gonna be happy with a fox. Like I said, I'm letting letting everybody know a lot right now about me today and the deep lore of Harry Potter that I've become familiar with over the years. Now, that is all that we have for today. Normally, this is where I would allow our guests to plug their socials, but as I understand it, Mr. Baum does not want you to find him on social media or talk to him on social media. And don't text him, don't slide into his DMs. He's a married man, and he doesn't want to be your friend. He has friends, okay? Don't reach out to him. I'm serious. He'll block you and find you and all that stuff Liam Neeson said and taken, so don't do it. All right, that's all for today. Be sure to tune in next Thursday for our Instagram live session or catch our latest episode on Spotify and YouTube, which will be released either very late tonight or very early tomorrow, depending on my sleeping habits. We can't wait to have you join us. Take care and talk soon. Good night.
Make a wish for ones with a secret. And if I manifest best guess I'll keep it. I'm so go with the flow, new fate. Up ones one day. Thought ones, thoughts come